A little homeless girl begs Johnny Depp for help, and then he notices something important, prompting him to take immediate action. Amid the towering glass monoliths of downtown, Johnny Depp emerged from the grand entrance of a luxurious hotel. The air carried the usual urban symphony: distant car horns, murmurs of passers-by, and the faint rumble of construction echoing from blocks away. Dressed in his signature eclectic fashion, sunglasses perched on his nose, Johnny strode towards the sleek black limousine idling at the curb. Thomas, his chauffeur, a tall man in his 50s, stood dutifully by the vehicle. With practiced ease, Thomas opened the rear door as Johnny approached. "Good morning, Mr. Depp," he greeted with a polite nod. "I hope you had a pleasant stay." Johnny returned the gesture with a warm smile. "Morning, Thomas. It was fine, thanks. Looking forward to getting back home, though. But first, we've got one more stop for a photo shoot." As Johnny prepared to slide into the plush leather interior, a small figure suddenly darted past him with surprising speed. Before he fully registered what was happening, he felt something latch onto his leg. Looking down, he saw a completely bald little girl clinging to him, her body trembling as her eyes fixated on something distant, avoiding his gaze entirely. Caught off guard, Johnny gently rested a hand on her shoulder. "Hey there," he said softly, trying to meet her eyes. "Are you all right?" Before she could respond, an angry shout pierced the air. The girl's grip on Johnny's leg tightened briefly before she abruptly let go and fled, vanishing into the bustling crowd without a word. A red-faced man in his 40s, wearing an apron with the logo of a nearby convenience store, stormed over. His gaze was fixed in the direction the girl had disappeared, not yet realizing who he was addressing. "That little brat," the man spat, his tone dripping with bitterness. "She's always hanging around my store, scaring away customers. Nothing but bad luck, I tell you." Johnny raised an eyebrow, his expression a blend of curiosity and concern. "Has she actually done anything wrong? Stolen something?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with challenge. Still caught up in his rant, the store owner replied, "No, she doesn't actually steal. She just wanders the aisles, looking and touching everything, always touching but never buying. It's unsettling. My regulars don't like it, and neither do I. She's probably just biding her time to snatch something when I'm not looking." Mid-sentence, the man's gaze landed on Johnny, and recognition dawned. His anger evaporated, replaced by embarrassment and awe. "Oh my God," he stammered, his face flushing. You're Johnny Depp." "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't realize." Johnny raised a hand, cutting off the man's flustered apologies. "It's all right," he said evenly. "But let me ask again. Has this girl ever broken anything or actually disrupted your store?" The man shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Johnny and the direction the girl had fled. "Well, no," he admitted grudgingly, "but she's always there, and it's not right." Johnny nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said, his voice softening to a reflective tone, "I've learned not to judge people for crimes they haven't committed. Maybe there's more to her story than meets the eye." Without another word, Johnny slid into the waiting limousine. Thomas closed the door behind him, muffling the store owner's muttered remark, "I don't like you celebrities anyway. Never care about what's really going on in the world." As the limousine pulled away, Johnny leaned back in his seat, the girl's frightened eyes and the man's misplaced anger lingering in his mind. Through the tinted window, the city's scenery rolled by, a blur of bustling sidewalks and urban life. "Thomas," Johnny called out, leaning forward slightly. "Could you drive a bit slower? I want to keep an eye out for something." Thomas adjusted the car's speed immediately. "Of course, Mr. Depp. Is everything all right?" Johnny's gaze scanned the streets. "I'm not sure," he replied, his brow furrowed in concentration. "There was a little girl back there. I need to make sure she's okay. Bald, maybe 9 or 10. Help me look for her." "Certainly, sir," Thomas responded reassuringly. They drove at a leisurely pace, passing bustling sidewalks, street vendors setting up their carts, and clusters of tourists. Johnny's sharp eyes darted from face to face, searching for the small, bald figure amidst the morning crowd. Just as he was about to lose hope, he spotted her, a familiar figure huddled against the wall outside another convenience store down the block. "Thomas," Johnny said quickly. "Pull over here, please." The limousine came to a smooth stop. Johnny stepped out and approached the girl cautiously, not wanting to startle her. She sat on the ground, a small paper cup extended for donations. Her posture spoke of exhaustion, but her eyes lit up with recognition as he neared. The customer standing before him looked familiar. "Excuse me," Johnny said courteously. "I'm looking for a little girl. Bald head. About this tall." He gestured with his hand to indicate her height. "Have you seen anyone like that around here recently?" The cashier's face stayed blank as he shook his head.
"Nah, man.
Haven't seen any kids in here today." Without waiting for further engagement, he turned his attention back to his game. Disheartened but not giving up, Johnny thanked him and stepped out onto the street. The afternoon sun bore down as he moved a few steps in each direction, scanning the alleys and sidewalks nearby. He couldn't help but feel the clock ticking before fans might notice him again. Yet, the urge to find and help the girl wouldn't leave his mind. After several more minutes of searching without success, Johnny reluctantly returned to the waiting limousine. Settling into the back seat, he retrieved his phone, scrolling through a calendar overflowing with appointments and obligations, a stark reminder of his busy professional life. Thomas started the engine and prepared to head toward the next stop, the photo shoot. The car began gliding down the street toward the next block, but Johnny was lost in his thoughts. "Maybe she's gone for good," he mused. The soft hum of the engine filled the air until a faint knock on the window broke the silence. Slowly, Johnny turned, blinking in surprise. Outside, pressed against the glass, was the small face of the girl he'd been looking for. Her tiny hands cupped around her eyes as she peered intently inside. His heart skipped a beat, recognizing her bald head, unmistakable even through the tinted glass. The limousine had stopped at a red light, and Johnny's eyes darted to the traffic signal countdown. Only seconds remained before the light would change. Acting on instinct, he reached for the door handle. Without hesitation, he opened the door and beckoned to her. "Come on," Johnny urged. In a quick decision, he swung the door open and helped her into the back seat just as the light turned green. The soft creak of the leather seats echoed as she settled beside him, her small frame appearing even frilier against the plush interior. Thomas glanced into the rearview mirror, his brow raised slightly in surprise, but he refrained from commenting. Instead, he smoothly accelerated as the light turned green. Inside the cool, comfortable limousine, the girl seemed to relax slightly, though her wide eyes roamed the lavish surroundings. It was a stark contrast to the streets she had been navigating. Johnny studied her quietly, noticing how she rubbed her arms as though cold, despite the comfortable temperature. "What's your name?" Johnny asked softly, trying to ease her nerves. "Sonia," she replied hesitantly, her voice small. "It's nice to meet you properly, Sonia," Johnny said warmly. "Now, can you tell me what kind of help you need?" Instead of answering, Sonia pointed through the window at a building they passed. Johnny followed her gesture and saw a worn sign on an old, rundown structure that read or AG. Before he could ask for clarification, Sonia gave another, more troubling signal. She touched her bald head and then lifted her sleeve, revealing a dark, alarming mark on her arm. "Please help, sir," she said softly, her voice trembling. The words carried a new weight, underscored by the visual clues she'd shared. Johnny felt a knot form in his stomach as he began piecing the situation together. He leaned closer to examine the mark, his expression growing serious. Her pale skin, bald head, and the concerning mark painted a grim picture of her health. "Sonia," he said gently, his tone laden with concern. "Are you sick? Is that why you need help?" The girl nodded, her eyes welling with tears. "The doctors at the orphanage said I need special medicine, but they don't have enough money," she explained. "I've been trying to save up," her voice faltered as she gestured at her meager belongings. The weight of her words pressed heavily on Johnny. He turned toward his chauffeur. "Thomas, can you find parking near that orphanage we passed? We need to speak with someone there." "Of course, Mr. Depp," Thomas replied, already steering the car toward a turn. As they neared the orphanage, Johnny's focus remained on Sonia. He noticed how her earlier courage was giving way to apprehension, her small frame seeming to shrink as they approached. "It's going to be okay," Johnny reassured her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out together, all right?" Sonia nodded faintly, managing a small, strained smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Abigail, we'll speak soon," he said before excusing himself and stepping aside to take a phone call. The caller was the event organizer for the photo shoot he was scheduled to attend. "Mr. Depp," came the voice on the other end, fraught with irritation. "Where are you? We've been waiting over an hour. The entire shoot is delayed." Johnny moved farther down the sterile hospital hallway, keeping a cautious distance from prying eyes and ears as he searched for a quieter spot. After a brief hesitation, he made a quick decision. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice firm yet calm. "I won't be able to attend. There's an emergency." The organizer's tone shifted from exasperation to incredulity. "An emergency, Mr. Depp? But you assured us everything was on schedule. This shoot has been in the works for months. The contract is very clear." "I understand," Johnny interjected, maintaining his composure. "And I'll accept any penalties outlined in the contract. However, something more urgent requires my attention right now." Without waiting for a reply, he ended the call. He knew there would be repercussions, financial penalties, potentially strained professional ties, but as he glanced back toward the curtained area where Sonia lay, he was certain he'd made the right decision. Returning to Miss Abigail, Johnny noticed her discreetly wiping away tears. "Mr. Depp," she began, her voice filled with emotion. "I can't express how grateful I am for all you've done. But what happens now?" Johnny's eyes moved from Miss Abigail to the curtain concealing Sonia, then back to her. In that instant, the disparity between his privileged circumstances and Sonia's dire situation solidified his resolve. "Now," he said with quiet determination, "we ensure Sonia receives the care she needs. And while we wait for the doctor, why don't you tell me about your orphanage, Miss Abigail?" Miss Abigail took a deep breath, her gaze steady but shadowed with weariness. "It's called Hope's Haven," she said softly. "We've been running it for over 2 decades, but each year, it becomes harder. Being in the heart of the city, the costs are astronomical. Rent, maintenance, everything. The building itself is old and barely functional. We've done our best to make it safe and comfortable for the children, but it's never enough. Expanding isn't an option, and rising expenses make it difficult just to keep the doors open. Some of us, including myself, often have to volunteer our own money to cover the basics. We manage, but it's a constant battle. With the city growing around us, it feels like we're being squeezed out. The children deserve so much more than we can provide." And then Sonia's situation. She hesitated, letting out a tired sigh. "We just can't handle this on our own." Johnny listened intently, Miss Abigail's words settling heavily in his chest. His expression softened, and after a brief pause, he spoke with sincerity. "Miss Abigail, I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you," he said gently. "Sonia and all the children deserve far more than circumstances have allowed. I want to help." He paused, carefully considering his next words. "I'll cover all of Sonia's treatment costs, her hospitalization, everything. You shouldn't have to shoulder this burden alone, especially when it's within reach for her to get the care she deserves." Miss Abigail's eyes widened, disbelief etched across her face. "But the cost, she began, her voice faltering. Johnny raised a hand, silencing her protests with a calm yet resolute tone. "The orphanage doesn't need to pay anything back. This is on me," he said softly. "No child should have to beg for the chance to live. We're changing that, starting now." The coolness of the air conditioning felt refreshing against her lips, offering a reprieve from the heat of the sun. "At least my skin doesn't itch much anymore," she thought, "until the owners show up and chase me away." Johnny felt a pang in his chest as he listened, marveling at the simplicity of this brave little girl's dreams. He resolved to discuss the orphanage conditions with Miss Abigail, determined to turn some of Sonia's hopes into reality. As the movie played, A nurse entered quietly to take Sonia's final measurements and collect blood samples for her upcoming surgery. To Johnny's relief, Sonia hardly noticed, captivated by Captain Jack Sparrow's adventures. Johnny shared behind-the-scenes stories from the filming, her laughter and curious questions filling the room with warmth. For a few precious hours, the hospital room transformed into a magical world of pirates and Hollywood tales. When the movie ended, Sonia's eyelids began to droop, and by the time the credits rolled, she was fast asleep. The pirate hat perched at a jaunty angle on her head, and her tiny hand clutched the golden coin tightly. Johnny carefully turned off the TV and moved to the small couch without disturbing her. As he settled in for the night, his eyes lingered on her peaceful face. The quiet room, punctuated by the steady beeping of machines, became a space for reflection. The photo shoots and potential career repercussions faded into insignificance compared to the little girl before him. As sleep overtook him, Johnny made a silent vow to see Sonia through her fight and ensure she could experience the adventures every child deserves. When the first rays of sunlight crept through the blinds, Johnny stirred from his uncomfortable sleep on the couch. Blinking in disorientation, the memories of the previous day came rushing back. His gaze instinctively turned towards Sonia's bed, where she was already awake, clutching her pirate coin tightly. "Good morning, Captain Jack," she greeted him softly, her brave smile quivering against her evident fear. Johnny approached her bedside, gently adjusting her askew pirate hat. "Good morning, my brave little pirate," he replied warmly. "Ready for today's big adventure?" Before Sonia could respond, the door opened, and a medical team, led by Dr. Marvey, entered. Their kind leader explained the surgery preparations as the team checked Sonia's vitals. Moments later, Miss Abigail arrived, slightly breathless, but immediately at Sonia's side. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, her voice a blend of encouragement and worry. "Dr. Marvey will take great care of you today. Do you remember what we talked about?" Sonia nodded, her small hands gripping the coin and Miss Abigail's hand. "They're going to make me sleep, then take the bad stuff out of my body," she recited bravely. "That's right," Dr. Marvey assured her, smiling. "When you wake up, you'll start feeling much better." As the nurses prepared to transport Sonia to the operating room, panic flickered in her eyes. Noticing her rising fear, Johnny crouched close and spoke gently in his Jack Sparrow voice. "First Mate Sonia," he said, "remember how we talked about being brave? This is your moment to show everyone how strong you are. And don't forget, I'll be right here waiting when you return from this daring mission." With a deep breath, Sonia whispered, "Aye, Captain," and smiled faintly. Johnny walked beside her bed as she was wheeled away, whispering pirate-themed encouragement. At the operating room doors, her fear resurfaced, and she reached for Johnny's hand. He knelt beside her, his voice soft but firm. "You've got this, Sonia. Captain Jack believes in you, and when you wake, we'll have more adventures. I promise." Her small hand relaxed as the sedatives took effect, and with a final drowsy nod, she disappeared into the operating room. Johnny and Miss Abigail shared a silent, anxious glance before heading to the waiting area. The hours dragged on as they waited. When Dr. Marvey finally emerged, his tired face bore cautious optimism. "The surgery went well," he announced. "We removed the tumor and affected lymph nodes." Johnny and Miss Abigail hugged in relief, though the doctor reminded them this was only the beginning of Sonia's battle. They discussed the next steps: chemotherapy, potential radiation, and Johnny resolved to do whatever it took to help Sonia recover. When Sonia woke groggily in the recovery room, her first words were a weak, "Captain Jack." Johnny smiled, placing her pirate hat gently on her head. "I'm here, First Mate Sonia."
"You were so brave," he said.
Later, Johnny proposed creating a fund for Sonia's ongoing treatment and expanding the orphanage. Miss Abigail, stunned by his generosity, expressed her gratitude, but Johnny remained focused, determined to make a lasting impact. As Sonia rested, a group of her dorm friends visited, their eyes wide with awe at Johnny. Their whispers of wonder turned to giggles as he regaled them with pirate stories. Sonia, surrounded by friends and laughter, smiled despite her exhaustion. The pirate coin glinted on her bedside table, a symbol of the bond they'd formed. Johnny knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but as he watched the children's joy, he felt ready to face any challenge to give them the bright futures they deserved.